Hello and welcome to episode 5, Gun Control. This has been in the news a lot recently, particularly with the shootings in Connecticut on December 14th. And I'll say straight away that when I started this, I had a definite bias in favour of gun control. And so the data I started looking at was aimed at trying to prove that bias. However, I did go and collect data fairly. I didn't doctor anything, and so I collected essentially the number of homicides due to guns over a number of years from both the US and the UK, and also the population at the time, so that I could get a good figure on gun crime per 100,000 people. I then compiled that into a graph, which should be showing on the screen now, and the results are quite obvious that America has much higher rates of gun crime than the UK does. And this data is essentially worthless. If looked at from an overall outsider's point of view, the data is generalized simply because that's the form it comes in. It comes in homicides per year without any way to kind of drill down and look at individual cases, and even if I had that option, I wouldn't have had time to do that anyway. The data is also not easily compared. There is much more data from the US, simply because that's what I could find. The UK doesn't seem to have much useful data before the year 2000, and there is a very limited scope. There's only 2 countries here, and if you look at Switzerland, then you would obviously see something completely different. But again, Switzerland is different in that the people who own guns are actually much more controlled than people seem to think. I was reading a couple of interesting articles when I was doing research for this, and the only people in Switzerland who have guns have a reason to have them. Most of them have served as civilian army members for at least 6 months, and everyone has to go back and register them on a regular basis. There's also no data available on the number of crimes which were prevented by citizens owning guns in the US or the UK, and again, there's no data on individual circumstance, so I couldn't say for sure whether a restriction on guns would prevent any of these deaths. And if it wouldn't prevent the death, then it's no good as part of the statistic when it's looking at just gun control. So there's several solutions that people are talking about at the moment. One is less guns and one is more guns, and I personally don't think either of those will actually help, because there's a reason that people use guns, and to quote a common saying, bullets don't kill people, people do. There's also a lot of people talking about more money being put into mental health, bullying, acceptance programs, education in general, and I'm all in favour of that. It can never be a bad thing to have more money going into public services, but that's all other people which need to make those changes. Everyone's saying other people should put more money in, they should change, and I don't think that's good at all. I think that if there's going to be a change that happens throughout the whole of a society, then it has to be the members of that society who make the change. So what I have been thinking about recently is something which many different people have said over the years in many different ways, and that is to change on an individual level. Everyone has something about themselves which they could improve on, and I really strongly believe that if everybody in the world made a change and improved in one area of their lives, then there would be so much less negativity. If they improve an area which causes negative emotions in someone else, then that's just a whole world who is being nicer to each other, essentially. And it doesn't have to be deliberate, it doesn't have to be malicious, but at some point or another, I think everyone who actually thinks about it will admit that there is places that they can improve. And I've been thinking about it from a personal point of view, and I think that although I try to be as accepting as possible, there are times when I fail in that, particularly when a stereotype such as chavs or hipsters are concerned. And I think that's what I'm going to try and do for the new year, is just keep an eye on that and make sure that I'm not kind of judging people before I get to know them. And really, that's pretty much all I want to say on this topic. I've got all of the links and all of my research in the description, and I will also link to the compiled data that I put together and the graph that I showed. So I will just leave on a quote. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. Goodbye, Internet.